Good morning, and I wanted to start with two caveats. I am not a sport historian, and I am not South African, so you may wonder why I'm here. I am also the only thing keeping you from a break, so the odds are stacked against me, but we grow from doing hard things. So here I am, so I'm really lucky to be spending this year here in South Africa, given some of my background. Long journey led me here, and so I have been really happy to, I suppose, become more of an insider than I have been in some of my previous programs that I have run. And so as Gustav and I were talking about this conference and thinking, what do I have to offer? I don't want to tell South Africans what it's like in South Africa post-apartheid. I don't know. I know what I've experienced here in this year. So I'm coming to you with a little bit of a different perspective on this broader issue. And so I wanted to think about the experiences I've had here and what it means for the social impact sport can have in South Africa, and just wanted to give you a context of this isn't only coming from an American. Obviously, I am an American. I've lived my whole life in America until this year, but I have run programs all over the world, mostly through sport diplomacy, so cultural exchanges, and how can we learn about and embrace cultural differences using sport as this really amazing platform. So this I think, gives a little bit of a sense is that, it's not just South Africa and America, but the Far East, South Central Asia, the Middle East, Western and Eastern Europe. So that's a little bit of where this is going to come from. And I wasn't really sure how much of today's conference would be on social impact, but actually after listening this morning, I don't even think I need to do this. I'm going to actually skip through a few slides that was sort of on some baseline sport for development. So yes, I'm going to keep going past a few of these. Okay. So, contextually, when we think about the social impact sport can have in South Africa, this is a little bit of a heat map. And so some researchers recently in 2017 published an article talking about social impact programs across the globe. And they reported that about 40% of these programs are happening in Africa. That's as much as the next 3 regions combined. So there is a lot of social programming happening in Africa as a continent, and in 3 countries specifically, there seems to be a larger percentage of social change programming happening as opposed to anywhere else. Meanwhile, most of the research is coming out of the UK, Europe, US, Canada, Australia, and so there was for a long time the thought that, are the social change programs being run by Westerners, as we would call them? And luckily, in this same study, most organizations who reported about their programs have said that their headquarters are in the countries where their programming is running, which is actually a really good change that has come over time. So it's not someone from abroad telling you how to run a social program, but it's locals. And so I'm going to talk a lot about local context, and it's important in this. So there's obviously already a lot going on. There's obviously a lot of opportunity, as has been spoken about this morning up until now. So as I talk about some of, I think, the important considerations, and again, this is in the context of maybe a comparison to what I've seen in countries all over the world and how their sport for development organizations are running and what their challenges are and really what their opportunities are. And as I talk about this, I put this INVEST logo up here. So INVEST is the program that I'm here helping to pilot, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So the INVEST program is, short version is it's a life skills and leadership program for girls in a local high school. And so we're teaching these young women to be coaches and hopefully ultimately coach the younger ones and develop this pipeline, because there really is very little soccer for girls in this community right now. And so that's again, a very short version of what we're doing there. And so focusing on things like confidence building and resilience and communicating effectively and being a good leader, managing others, the list goes on and on. So in speaking to, so a lot of what I'll talk about today is going to relate to what I've experienced with the young women that I'm working with and in the community that I'm working in, and hopefully can be a little bit of a maybe blueprint of things to think about if we want to have the most effective and impactful programming. So in this school where I am, they have about 700 students. It's actually a bit less than that now. They have 19 teachers. So if you're coming from an American standpoint, that's an absurd ratio. And so in talking to the principal of the school about this program and the development and what do the girls need and how are we going to best reach them, the short version was they need almost any life skills leadership that you can give them because the teachers were so short-staffed and under-resourced that we're barely giving them the education that they need. And so it's really hard for us to additionally focus on life skills and leadership and other things that maybe in certain schools they do have the resources and time to do. So obviously blank canvas. And so I've really had lots of conversations with the principal, even just as recently as last week, about what are the best ways to teach young women to be empowered and make an impact, etc. So these will be the people that you're hearing a lot about today. Okay, so there's probably 20 different topics that could be discussed here as really important keys in thinking about how best to operate a sport for social change organization. And I've just chosen 4 to focus on today. And the first one is local context. So this, typically in the programs that I'm doing overseas, they are short-term programs, and we really rely a lot on the locals to help give us the context. Now living here, having been here for 7.5 months, I feel like I'm starting to understand the local context, but still regularly I get surprised. And so it's very difficult, and this will lead into the next one, for an outsider to come in and build the trust and relationships that need to be built when they have a lack of understanding of local context. Even simple things like the second week of programming. Actually, I was in the office with Gustav, and about an hour before program, the school called and said, there's no transport for the girls today, so you can't have programming. And so it was another issue that we had to solve. Setting up a meeting with the principal. You know, a lot of people just pop in. Well, I would, feel like, well, they're really busy. I can't just pop in. But actually, that is the most effective way to get a meeting with the person that's running the school. So learning some of these things takes a lot of time. And so obviously, if you can have local context already built in by having local leaders running programming, this is the key, for sure. And so I'm lucky to have some people working with me and who ultimately will run this program moving forward, but it has been, for sure, and still is a learning experience for me, the very, very high importance that's put on understanding a local context. And that's not just country specific. That's not me as an American understanding South Africa. It's from community to community. It varies greatly, as I'm sure you all already have experienced and understand. So the second one, which fits really well with local context, is power dynamics. And if you read any literature on sport for social change, this is a huge topic that is discussed. That the people running the programs aren't the same as the people we are delivering programming to. And that creates a lot of power dynamics. I've come in, I'm white, and I am not working with people in a white community. I am American, and there are lots of, I'm not sure what word to use, there are lots of things the girls think that means about me, like that I'm rich. Or, fill in the blank of what that might mean by being American, by being educated. I'm female, and there are not many females working with the girls in these communities. So while it's great that I'm a female working with females, it does mean that there may be some other issues that come about. So power dynamics also are a really important consideration, and I wanted to show you an example from a past program that we ran in South Africa. This was in 2015. This was a program we worked with grassroots soccer in the Boys and Girls Club in Soweto. Actually, this one's in Alexandra, so in the Johannesburg area. And this was our US delegation that came over. And this is the group that we were working with. And so even just looking at the picture, you can see that there are going to be issues of understanding and some power dynamics issues. So this is the key that we have found to turning over and helping train up and helping to alleviate the power dynamics issues, is that all the other coaches in there with us, it's sometimes hard to tell who's with which group, they're the ones running programming. And so as the outsiders, obviously I'm coming in this year as this, training local leadership is so, so important. I mean, if you get nothing else out of this, and I, again, feel like I'm speaking to a group that already is well aware of this, but even as academics, as people at a university, we're outsiders sometimes to the communities in which we're working. And so if we can find the right people that grew up in that community, live in that community, understand what the kids are experiencing, that is so, so important. And so all of these coaches here are now running programs totally for the kids in their community. And so a lot of the trust issues that may come initially aren't there when you're able to do it that way. Okay, number 3 is collaborations. Actually, I was just this morning having a conversation coming in. So I think in Stellenbosch alone, there are maybe 6 organizations that I'm aware of that are running very similar programming using the sport of soccer. As I talk to people, I find out there are even more than that. And then a lot of them don't know a lot about the other organizations, don't know each other, don't know what else is going on in the area. And while there is a bit of a competitive nature, especially when there are limited resources between maybe some of these organizations, the amount of capital that can be built by collaborating is super important. Shared coaches training, shared knowledge bases, talking through what are the challenges you're facing and which ones am I facing and how can we work through these together. So I actually think that this is going to be a huge way forward if in these communities we can find better ways to create collaborations between programs doing similar work. In Cape Town Central, through Laureus, there is some collaboration going on. So a lot of the organizations that are funded through Laureus come together monthly and do collaboration. Now, they're not necessarily in the same communities or even the same sports. So I think there's maybe less of that competitive nature, but it is creating better best practices. And so I, for sure, am of the belief that if we all come together, we all get better. I know that that's not necessarily the nature of sport when we're competing against someone else, but I think you could do exactly what Laureus is doing with their funders on more local and smaller levels, even just within Kailicha or even just within Stellenbosch. How can we bring these organizations together to essentially have a better sense of learning from one another to improve? And then finally, evaluation. So here's where our academic side of things comes in. A lot of sport for social change organizations that are started are done so by people who want to do good in their community and who love sport, and so the evaluation piece of it is not planned from the start. I'm just going to start a program and help people, which is awesome. But if we want continued support and funding, we have to have some type of evaluation of the programming, of what's happening so that we can garner this continued support. One of the groups that does this really well is called Right to Play. They're based out of Canada initially, but they are all over the globe. And they let me be clear, they have decades of experience and of programming to build their evaluation on, but they basically go through each of their pillars, so education, health practices, peaceful communities, and gender equity, and have really clear, measurable objectives and evaluation that's really strong. Evaluation in this area is extremely difficult because a lot of the change you see is in individuals, which is really hard to quantify. And so I actually think that's an area where universities and faculties can come together with grassroots organizations to help provide maybe some of that expertise for the organizations. So I think this gets overlooked, and then you're several years into your program and you realize, well, I think it's working, but I have no data to show for it. So I think, again, the evaluation piece is really important. As I said at the beginning, I could have talked about a million things. Sustainability is huge. It's actually one of the things I am trying to figure out now with the program I'm running. There's a lot of stuff about like grassroots programming. So what's your programming content? What works well? Funding is huge. Pathways to success for maybe athletes who do show some promise beyond the programming you're offering. There are so many things that could go into this, but I think these four, from my experience in the few months that I've been here, are going to be, if we can focus on these four keys, then programming is going to be successful. So, do I have another slide? Oh yeah, that's that again. I actually have to run straight after the conference because I have to get to the girls. We have programming today, so I wanted to make sure to share my information in case I can't chat with as much as I'd like to after the conference today. But yeah, this year, I will just say in closing for me that this year has been a really big growth opportunity for me personally. Because I think all these things I have studied and written about and done in different contexts around the world, but to actually be living and fully immersing myself in a new community, I cannot understate how much I have learned and grown from having to be an outsider and try to make a difference. And so I think that we all are making a difference, but yeah, some of these things have just become more and more clear throughout my time here, and I'm sure that in the next 4 more months I have here that this will change and there will be more and more that comes from it. So I feel very lucky to be here in your community. So thank you.